Hello everyone, both here and in cyberspace. I hope there are more people in cyberspace than in this room. It's usually the case. So we're here to speak about, we're in the 3 weeks, the three saddest weeks of the Hebrew calendar that began a week ago, Tuesday, on the 17th of Tammuz, and will conclude in 2 weeks, Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the calendar. Time where we commemorate and we remember the Bein Hamtzarim, the two boundaries that we find ourselves in these 3 weeks, where sandwiched between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. And this is a period in time which, as I said, we commemorate being the saddest part of the year. But why? Why do we still remember it after all these thousands of years? So we'll answer this question with another question. Classic Jewish style, and that is, we read this week, and we always read it during the 3 weeks. We read the chapter of Maseh. Maseh is the chapter of journeys. It's the end of the 4th book of Torah, called Bamidbar, and we concluded with Maseh, this week's chapter, called the Journeys. And here, the Torah reviews the 42 journeys that the Jewish people took from the time they left Egypt until they came to the land of Israel. 42 journeys, 42 steps in the process, which took 40 years, the 40 years in the wilderness. So in essence, really the Torah's, the story of the Jewish journey to the Promised Land concludes in this week's chapter. Why do we have a 5th book of the Torah, which we'll read next week? Because that one is already, Moses then says, they reach to the east bank of the river Jordan, and Moses tells them that now I'm going to be passing away in 37 days. So the next book is Moses, his last will and testament, and he reviews everything that took place in the last 40 years. But essentially, the narrative of the Torah really concludes in this week's chapter. And as you know, whenever a Torah book ends, when the finish of the reading will be on Shabbat, the whole congregation will rise, and the reader of the Torah will say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek, be strong and be strong and be strengthened. Because that's when we conclude each book of the Torah. Eitz Chaim Hi, the Torah is a strong tree, a tree of life that we hold on to, the Machzikim Bo. So we strengthen ourselves with the Torah. But the chapter is about journeys. Now it's one thing that the Jews actually traveled. Fine, people travel. It's interesting, just as the FAA is issuing a prohibition of American and United States airlines from flying to Israel, we read in the chapter about the journey to Israel. You know, someone pointed out to me that actually in the reading itself of this week's chapter, there's a statement that talks about that when you leave your enemies empowered in the land of Israel, they will come, and then it literally says they will become like barbs that won't allow anyone in and won't allow anyone out. So it's interesting that some things don't change. The question is, what is the significance of these journeys? That an entire chapter is designated. One thing, the Jews have to travel. You travel from one place to another. But the fact that you have an entire chapter called Maseh, which means the journeys, and they're enumerated, every journey, every step of the way, tells us there's something about journeys that are very significant in life in general, life of Jews in particular. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, I actually, based on some of the mystical teachings, I wrote 7 weeks. I discussed a series of the 42 journeys that the Jews took in the wilderness, what it means in our personal lives. If you want information on that, just send us an email. I'll be happy to send it to you. So what's the significance of journeys? You know, we're now in the summer months in this hemisphere, and people travel. Some people love to travel. Yeah, people like to travel. Why do we like to travel? Is it because we like to visit new places? Is it because we don't like being stuck in one place? Is it the idea of being mobile? There's something about journeys that fascinates people. You know, journeys that people have taken, journeys that we've taken. So I want to discuss this whole theme of journeys in context of the 3 weeks, in context also of what's going on in Israel right now. Now, if you look in the Torah, you'll find that journey is everywhere. Almost every chapter has another journey. Whether it's the journey from Adam and Eve leaving being expelled from Garden of Eden, whether it's journey of Noah, taking a trip on a cruise during the flood, not exactly a cruise, but taking a trip on the ark, whether it's Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha, the journey that Abraham began, the journeys of Isaac, the journeys of Jacob, the journeys of Joseph. Wherever you turn, you find journeys. Everybody travels. And then, of course, the conclusive journey in the Bible, which is the main bulk of it, the 40 years in the wilderness where they traveled, Maseh, the journeys. If you think about it, it's not that complicated to figure out, because life is a journey. It begins, actually, not only life in general, it begins upon birth. The way the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters put it is that every soul goes on a journey, Yeridus HaNeshama B'guf, on a journey from heaven to earth. So the first journey we all take is the journey of leaving the spiritual habitat where souls dwell to enter into this material world. And that journey is a very painstaking one, a difficult one, and it ends with us entering our mother's womb, and then it ends at the end of pregnancy when we pop out and we're born, our birthdays. So our birthday is really the end of a long journey. But then begins the next journey, and that is the journey from birth through the years of this life that we live. And then comes the next journey, when after a person passes away, after 120 years, or as many years as God gives us, starts the next journey where the soul continues on its journey. So journey is the essence of what life is all about. And what's the significance of a journey? So we'll use an example from basic science. Anything that doesn't move is not alive. A journey signifies life and movement. Think of the heartbeat. The heart is always beating. Think of the breath. We're always exhaling and inhaling. And I always bring the example of this cardiologist that comes once in a while to the class. And he has a very stressed life for many reasons. So he's always telling me, I wish life was just very calm and basic and simple. And so I say, like what? Like a straight line? So he says, no, not exactly like that. Because we know a cardiogram that's a straight line, that's death. You want a cardiogram to look like a wave. A wave goes like that. Obviously, in a wave, you don't want it to have extremes, not too many high peaks or low valleys. You want it to be like that. That's life. So everything about life is movement. Movement means a journey. It means we're traveling somewhere. I remember, I forgot where I saw it, where there was a situation where a person children lost a parent at a young age. And they were dealing with this issue of how you correct, obviously there's no words that you can tell people like that, anyone going through that type of experience. But they were standing by a field, and you saw an apple tree where some apples had fallen off the tree and they were rotting. And if you see an apple rot, there's a point where the apple gets reabsorbed into the earth. You could see it's like half rotten, but it's already being half absorbed. And when you see it, it's very fascinating. It's like then you see the metamorphosis of, let's say, a sapling. When it begins to sprout, it's very fascinating to see it change. Obviously, it doesn't happen overnight, but you can see the process. Today, you have on camera where they fast forward, they what they call a multi-exposure image, and you literally can see something growing. It's really fascinating. And I think the uncle tells them, you remember, when it comes to the journey of life, everything is on its way to another place. And it's an interesting way of understanding life. First of all, it's very comforting to know that nothing is just the way it remains. Everything is on a journey. Tomorrow will be a different day than today. Do you mind? Because there was a chassid that said once that every morning he would wake up, or before he went to sleep rather, every night when he would go to sleep, he would say, tomorrow will be a better day than today. Many of us, part of our resignation, our depression, our sadness, our melancholy, is often a result of us just going through the motions. But in Jewish thought, we have to see our lives as being dynamic, which means every day is a new day. Every second, for that matter, is a new second. When you study some of the mystical teachings, you find that every minute, literally, a new energy enters into the world. What happens at the end of an hour is there's actually a change of guard, so-called spiritual guard. There's a change of the permutations of God's name, of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So in truth, every moment is another energy. Every day is a new day. Which, as I said, gives a person hope. That means there's no such thing as being stuck or trapped in whatever situation you're in, because everything is a journey to another place. Which also means even when things are going very well, never lock yourself in and think this is the end of the story. Wise people, Ezu Chacham, who's the wise person? Harayas Hanoilad, the one that sees the birthing. Wise people don't never get caught up in the moment. They always look at what are the consequences. What will happen tomorrow? What will happen the next day? If I do so and so, what are the ramifications, the implications, what processes and ripple effect will it have? You'll see most mistakes we make is because we live in the moment, we're somewhat seduced or consumed or obsessed with a given thing, and we react. If we thought about the big picture, what would happen tomorrow? What will happen a year from now? What will happen in generations from now? Our whole attitude would be a very different one. So the idea of a journey takes on a much deeper shape. It's not just a question of traveling. It's a question of knowing that life is movement. And movement consists of the constant change that defines what life is all about. You know, when you talk about a good swimmer, an excellent swimmer is not someone who's swimming all the time. An excellent swimmer is someone who knows how to navigate. So if they're in let's say, in a water, and it gets choppy and stormy, they know that at that point, it's best perhaps not to fight the tide, and maybe just go with the flow. And then when it gets calm, that's when you use your energy to thrust forward. So it's really about navigation rather than just constantly moving. People who are inexperienced, not just in swimming, in any type of movement, will expend energy at times when they should not be expending energy. You have to really know, to be wise, to know when is it time to invest energy and when is it time best to ride the tide, to tread water, etc., etc. You know, in life this is also the case. Sometimes you're in a situation where you may be fragile, or you may be in a situation where you're not, don't have all your strength. At that time it's best not necessarily to try a new initiative. Maybe at that time it's to take stock, to review, and so on. You even see in business, when there's downturns, there's wise business people, they use that as well as a time to review, a time to perhaps cut the fat, time to become more introspective, plan. Because everything, there's a time of plenty, and there's a time of famine, there's a time of plenty. What was so brilliant about Joseph that turned him into a Mishnah Lamelech, a viceroy of Egypt? So we know the story that Pharaoh had the two dreams that he had, one of 7 thin cows swallowing up 7 fat cows, and then 7 thin stalks swallowing up 7 very what we call abundant ones. So Joseph's interpretation was that there are going to be 7 years of plenty, the grain and the produce of Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine. So the 7 thin will swallow the 7 fat. Okay, fine, that was a brilliant interpretation. But then Joseph gave advice. So his advice was, since we know that 7 years of famine are coming, and now there's 7 years of plenty, he said stockpile. Stock up enough grain that will last for the next 7 years of famine. And this single piece of advice turned Egypt into a superpower. One of the first. Because everyone needed grain, and they were the only ones that actually did that. So what was so brilliant about it? It seems like a simple piece of advice. If you know a famine is coming tomorrow or in 7 years, obviously stock up now, because the brilliant advice was implementing it. We all know in our minds, but why do they have a thing called forced savings? Because you're not going to do it if you're not forced to do it. Some people say, every month I'll put away some money. But if it's forced, which means that it's like automatic, then you don't have the temptation of saying, this month I won't put away. Next month I'll put away twice as much. It doesn't work. Because human nature lives in the moment, and we get caught up emotionally in the instant. So the brilliance of Joseph was knowing how to implement it. That even though there was plenty, and people could say, maybe this is never going to end. Maybe the famine was a mistake. Maybe the prophecy, maybe the dream was not accurate. Whatever reason, the tendency when you're successful is you're riding high, you take it for granted. That's understanding the journey. As the Rebbe Rashab once told an individual, that life is like a Ferris wheel. At the time, I believe in Vienna, the first Ferris wheel was invented in the late 19th century. It was a big event because no one ever saw a big Ferris wheel. And so he gave the Ferris wheel as an analogy for life. Life is a Ferris wheel. When you're on top, know that it continues to turn, and one day you may be at the bottom. And when you're at the bottom, don't think this is where it's at. It continues to turn. Galgal HaChezer, a spinning wheel. And you find it in poetry and songs and books, the idea, the concept of a spinning wheel, the idea that life is a journey. So that's the first basic lesson. Jews were always masters of knowing this. That's why nothing could destroy them. Because they always knew they were on a way to another place. If it's really terrible, they knew they were going to a better place. And if it was really great, they didn't take it for granted. They always knew that there may be times when there may be famine, may not be so good. So you prepare. That's what wise people do. And you see collectively, that's what Jews do. That's why the Torah is so consumed with journeys, because it's telling us the secret of life. Don't ever convince yourself that life is static. Now, you should know nature and the animal kingdom, they're all aware of it. You see, that's why they react to the seasons. Look, just observe a tree. How a tree goes into hibernation in the winter, then asleep, and then suddenly begins to blossom in the spring, and then it thrives in the summer, only to shed its leaves in the fall as it goes back to sleep. And animal kingdom also, they know there's the seasons. They're aligned with the cycles. We humans, due to our own arrogance, or we think we can control everything, think we can eliminate the cycles. Just take, for example, the idea that in New York, for example, 24/7, you can get anything you want. You can get fruit that's completely out of season with a phone call. So you start convincing yourself that, we're supermen. We can do anything we want. When in truth, it's not the case. Some people complain about LA, that even though it's a beautiful climate, but it never changes. So it's not natural, because life changes. New York, some say, is much more aligned with the real cycles of life. One day it's freezing cold, the other day it's bitterly hot. Bitterly cold, I should say, and terribly hot. That's the cycles of life. But people like sometimes a plastic environment where things are just consistent. Like being a couch potato. This is a human invention. We sit in a couch and we just sit. This concept of what are you doing? Nothing. Is a human invention that goes actually against the grain of what humanity is about, which is constant movement. The idea, I'm just sitting. What are you sitting? I'm watching. I'm watching other people move. What do they say about a baseball game? You have 50,000 people who need to lose weight watching 18 people who don't. So life is really movement, but we have tried to master and become like, you could sit in one little place and not make any movement, which really goes against the grain of who we are. That joke, Yankel was an older man sitting on a bench one day. He was very despondent, in a bad mood. His friend comes over and says, "Why are you such a bad mood?" He says, "My wife is very angry at me." "Why is she angry at you?" I'm saying, what's new about that? She's angry every day at you. She says, no, now she's really upset. What happened? This morning, when she went to work, she asked me, "What are you going to do today?" I said, "Nothing." So she said to me, "That's what you said yesterday." And I told her I wasn't finished. I wasn't finished doing nothing, that is. So some people are busy doing nothing, and they still need to finish doing nothing. So it's a plan that today I'm going to do nothing. Now this concept goes against human nature, because as I said, everything about us, imagine your heart and your breath decided to do nothing. You wouldn't be very happy. They have to constantly be moving. The question is how you move and how you navigate. Like I said, in the winter, it's one way. In the summer, it's another way. So that's why the Torah talks about the journey, so makes it so significant. As a matter of fact, the 40 years that it took the Jews to go from Egypt to Israel, if you know the way, it doesn't take 40 years. God actually took them out of the way on a detour, just to demonstrate, for many reasons, but one of the reasons was to capture the concept of a journey. And the entire Torah is a journey. So it's no surprise that in the 3 weeks when we honor one of the saddest journeys in our history, the time of the destruction of the temple and all the other sad events that happened in this period, is we read journeys, because we know that the temple is not, even when it's destroyed, it's a journey toward a better temple. It's like you raise a building with a Z. You knock down a building in order to build a better building in its place. So someone will come and say, "Hey, I only see destruction." That's because you're living in the moment. Life is never in the moment. Kierkegaard wrote that you can only understand your life backwards, but you need to live your life forwards. Right? When you look back often in your life, you see dots that you would never have imagined could be connected. When you're living in the moment, you don't know what tomorrow brings. So you wonder sometimes, why did this have to happen to me? Why did I have to meet that person? Why did I have to suffer in this way? Why did I have to be in pain? And any of you have been to any negative situation in your life, you know years later, it's a whole different story than while you're in it. When you're in it, you almost can't imagine surviving. But when years pass or time passes, you suddenly realize, something, I survived and I learned what I had to learn. Sometimes you're able to understand what happened, sometimes you don't. But as a wise people, it doesn't mean because we don't understand it for the moment, don't think there's no bigger pattern. Now, obviously, we make mistakes, and mistakes we have to avoid, but to live and agonize over a mistake you made last year or 2 years ago is not the way. Once the mistake is done, you cannot reverse it. Now you have to do something to redeem it. And there are many ways to do that. Many of us who dwell on the negative is because we're not appreciating the journey of things. So we live in the past and we live in what was done to us and grievances and resentments and anger and so on and so forth. When in truth, after the fact, we have to always think in terms of redeeming. So even these sad days that we're going through, it's all about redeeming. That's why we remember them every year. It's not that we're sitting shiva just to grieve and mourn over the past. It's because we're trying to redeem negative events that took place. I mentioned earlier that one of the primary reason for the destruction of the Second Temple was baseless hatred. Okay, so you could say terrible. Look what it caused. The baseless hatred caused the destruction of the temple, the long exile, so much suffering. So we can just sit and agonize over it. Or you can translate and say, okay, the opposite of baseless hatred is baseless love. What can I do to counter the negative by doing something equally powerful in the positive? We're all our hearts, as I said before, with our brothers and sisters in Israel. So you can sit and watch the news all day and agonize and then talk about this and talk about that and analyze what this one did. Or you can strengthen the Israel within your own soul by adding in prayer, in study, in charity. These things rebuild and fortify, because remember, the power of Israel is a spiritual power. So the more spiritual we are, the more powerful we are in our spirit, the more powerful we rebuild Israel from within. This is the Jewish way. It's not about analyzing the news, not about interpreting it, commenting on it, or just listening. It's about doing something. It's action. It's about acting on it and doing something. And this has been, you'll see, all the real leaders, all the productive individuals, Jewish history, were people who took a situation, even sometimes very difficult situation, and they took it into, how do you build something out of it? I witnessed this personally. I saw the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, every time a tragedy took place, or there was a loss, his family, or some other, or in Israel there was a war. What did he do? He always built something new. It was never about dwelling on the negative. It was taking the negative energy and doing something positive with it. That's what a real journeyer, traveler does. Someone who does not know how to travel, they just get stuck. It's like, let's say you're traveling on a road and you're going somewhere, and then you hit an impediment. You don't know. So many of us just get very flustered or disturbed, and we don't know what to do. What do I do now? Some of us may even backtrack and say, I got to retreat. Some of us just get paralyzed and stay stuck there. What does a real traveler do? You figure out what to do. Look at water, for example. Water is not even human, but water moves. When water hits an impediment, what does it do? It doesn't sit around. It starts working its way. It's going to find a crack. It may take time. It may go this way. It may go that way. Like the roots of a tree as well. They will continue to look for their sustenance. That's what a real traveler does. The Jewish people always knew how to do that. That's why they never got themselves destroyed. Because even when there was negative things that happened, there was always a step going to another place. So that's an overall lesson in the whole process. And there's so much that it could teach us in our own personal lives. As I mentioned, that the 42 journeys that the Jewish people took from Egypt to Israel, which are enumerated in this week's chapter, each one of them, the Baal Shem Tov says, we all will go through these 42 journeys in our lifetime. And he even says someplace that even actually every day we go through them. So as I mentioned, I wrote up, I was intrigued by this idea, so I went to study and to research what are the 52 journeys in our lives. So again, if you're interested in reading that, I wrote up a whole series on that, and you can find it online on our website, Meaningful Life. Just go to Journeys or something like that, or if you don't find it, email us. I'll be happy to send it to you. So there's a lot to say about each specific here. I'm not going to go into that since I already did that. But what it brings it down, to bring it down, drive it more, point home more in our own personal lives, as I said, I was focusing on negative experiences, to know that nothing remains that way. That if you're able to forge ahead and see it through, you'd be surprised where it can lead. The Baal Shem Tov has an interesting analogy for that. He calls it the analogy of the Schwindeltreppe. If you know Yiddish, Schwindeltreppe literally means swindling steps. It's a word Yiddish for a spiral staircase. So Yiddish, a spiral staircase is called a swindling staircase. Swindling steps. Why? What's a swindler? A swindler is a person who deceives, right? A swindler. So when you walk up a regular set of staircase, a straight staircase, so it may be many steps, but you see the destination up ahead. When you walk up a spiral staircase, things are very different. You don't see the destination straight ahead because it's spiral. So you keep making these 180 degree, 360 degree turns until you finally get it. It's a very good use of space. You can actually create a staircase where if you have less space, a spiral staircase gets you right there because you don't need to go in the length. You just go up. But the interesting thing, and this is what the Baal Shem Tov says, that right before you reach your destination to the top, you have to make one final turn, and your back is facing the destination. So you can convince yourself, if you don't know better, that you're not close to the destination. And he gives the example in life. That's what life is like. It's not like a straight staircase, it's a spiral staircase. That's why it's called swindling. It swindles you into thinking that you have not reached your destination, which is often happens in life. You make effort, and then you don't see results, so you give up. When the fact is, if you really knew you were right there, 99.9% was done, and you went and someone else grabbed the whole reward, that whole effort you made. It's critical to realize that in life, seeing things through. And life sometimes means that you will not see your destination in front of you. Your back will be faced to it, but it's right there. This is a tremendous example in life. He actually uses this example also, that there's certain in dancing, there's a dance that way too. Sometimes you dance with a partner face to face, but sometimes you turn and you don't see the partner. So he explains this analogy to understand life in this kind of context. The moon is another example. The Jewish people count and are compared to the moon. We bless the moon every month, and the moon is a symbol of Judaism, symbol of the nation of Israel, as opposed to the sun, which is a consistent rays of light. When the sun shines, besides sunspots and some fluctuations, the sun is a consistent source of light. The moon, on the other hand, is always going through phases. Always. Every day. The phases actually impact the earth too. The tides are affected by it. So you have a full moon, you have a new moon, you have the first quarter, you have the third quarter, and every day literally the moon's phases change. Which teaches us that what the moon reflects far more real life than does the sun. Because that's exactly life. It's waxing and waning. It's waxing and waning. This is the essence of every journey. So the journeys that will take us through the dips and the highs and the lows and the twists and turns of our lives. And the big challenge is, how can you navigate? Learning how to navigate is the key. Not learning to keep everything stable or to stay out of trouble or to make sure you don't get into any difficult place. Life is going to throw every type of curveball at us. And the ones that make it are the ones that know how to navigate. Navigate includes knowing when to absorb and knowing when to give. It's like, what do they say? Know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Right? Even if you don't play poker, that's a line everybody understands. You have to know when to continue fighting and when not to fight. And it's not always that easy. I'm sure we have situations that we all know where you're like really committed, you're really invested, and you don't know, should you stop, should you not stop? After you put in so much energy, should you stop now? Like I just said, maybe it's one more step to the destination. Or maybe you're putting too much energy. So there's no formula that I can say it's one way to know. You need to review everything objectively, and always best to review with a objective friend, someone that with a fresh set of eyes can look at it and tell you, this is what I think. So when you have these different, that's how you look at something. You have to always realize we have blind spots. When you're invested in something for so long, you may be your own worst enemy, because you are so much involved in it You can't extricate yourself from it. So it's all about learning the navigational tools. That is the key. And that's why the Jewish calendar, we don't shy away from 3 weeks or 9 days and sad days, just like we have a Purim. Like the Talmud says, Kashem, Shekmishanichnis Odem Marban B'Simcha, just as when Odem enters, we increase in joy. Actually, I think that's the opposite expression. Just as in the days of Av, we decrease in joy, in the days of Adar, we increase in joy. Why do you equate the two? What does one thing have to do with the next? I mean, the word increase, joy. The answer is because they're both two sides of one coin, the Ferris wheel. So they really complement each other. I discussed this, I believe, at length also once, regard to another interesting paradoxical statement where it says that Moses instituted 7 days of celebration after a wedding called Sheva Brachas, and 7 days and 7 blessings, and 7 days of grieving after a death. Why would you bring the two together? It's bad enough that we know that life is going to lead to some losses. But we're celebrating now. Why do you have to remind us that just like the days you're going to celebrate, there's going to be days you're going to grieve? Because it's really about understanding that life is a combination of the entire flow and movement on all levels. We don't just talk about the moment. We're talking about the whole picture. And the whole picture at the end is a good picture. Why do we break a glass at the end of a chuppah? The custom is to break a glass at the end of a wedding ceremony. You could think, so the most common reason everybody knows is because breaking the glass reminds us of the breaking of the temple, destruction of the temple. So the question is an obvious one. There's Tisha B'Av for that. You have times to remember that. Why at the high point of a couple's life, the night of their wedding, there's going to be plenty of challenges in their marriage. But at least give them one night. Why do you have to remind them under the chuppah already that there's destruction in the world? The answer is a very beautiful answer. The answer is the following. When someone, in their height of joy, remembers that the world is not perfect, and though I'm celebrating, there may be someone whose heart is broken, then the day comes when you're not celebrating, you have a sadness, you are also remembered. Those that arrogantly just celebrate and they 100% joy and they forget everyone else selfishly, then when it comes the day when they suffer, God forbid, they also are 100% sufferers and there's no room for any hope. When you're humble in your joy, you'll be humble, so to speak, also in your sadness. So it's a cycle. It's a psychological way of looking at life in a humble attitude. That when you're blessed, you should be humbled by the blessings. And when you're saddened, you should be humbled by the sadness and not think it's only about me. Because those that think, and now I'm celebrating because I deserve it or I'm a self-made person, what happens when things are not working out? Then you're completely devastated. Because your whole identity, your whole value is based on whether you're suffering or whether you're happy. When in truth, both should simply be seen as two stages in a journey. Now, obviously, we pray and we hope that every journey should be a positive one, and it should only be with joy, and it should not have any setbacks or worse. But that's not always how it works in this world, Even though it's so sad to see what's going on in Israel, and men, women, and children, especially children, being terrified by these air raid sirens, and having to run to shelters for no reason, simply because they're Jewish, and no matter how, I obviously biased, but as much as I bend over backwards to think, there are a lot of grievances that say Hamas may have. And they have grievances that Arabs and Muslims may have. Let's just even say they have real grievances. But why don't they have a human way of dealing with them? We also have grievances. We were killed, 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. Why aren't we shooting rockets at Germany? Why did we never consider doing that? Because you find ways, and if you're a healthy person, to figure out, that's even if you have a grievance. Some people say these grievances are also fabricated, which is another discussion. And yet, you see a world that does that, constantly is trying to justify in some way. Say, both sides are not perfect. Obviously, that's a fact. It's a nice statement. Of course, there's no one on earth that's perfect. But you have to really know how to distinguish between two separate things. And it just makes my blood boil when you read the articles. They say, so here civilians are being killed. Yeah, but you have to understand, in Israel, imagine that Israel would put one weapon in a school or in a hospital or near civilization. Everything is away from any type of innocent people. So to equate the two is so insane. But we live in what's called an Alma de Shikra. It's a world full of swindling and lies. And there's no one to turn to. Look, if the world could have been silent when 6 million Jews were being killed, and I'm sure there were people who found reasons why the Jews deserved it, then it's not surprising that today the world can find all kinds of excuses and reasons. That's why good Jews understand that you're not going to rely on the world. We don't need anybody's blessings. We didn't ask you whether we should exist or not. We've been here before everybody, and we'll be here after everybody. So we're not worried whether people are going to give us their endorsement, so to speak. This isn't a marketing campaign that you need Madison Avenue endorsements. So that's a given. But so to go expect that you're going to find some type of support, it's just not going to happen. So the bottom line is, the sad part is that this is a repeat of everything that's happened. But with all the sadness, to see the Am Yisrael Chai attitude, I hear I'll be going to Israel Saturday night. So this was planned before, but I wouldn't have canceled it, and it's El Al anyway, so I don't care what happens with other airlines, from my point of view. And I don't even have any hesitation. People ask me, "How you sure this?" No, it's not because I'm cocky or something. I just feel comfortable doing it, and that's that. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg could do it. I could also do it. That's not the point. The point I want to make is, I was going to mention at the end of the class, if any of you want to send your name or some charity for me to give, especially in these times, please feel to do so here at the end of the class. Or if someone online wants to do it, you can do it online on our site. But the point I'm making here is that on the other hand, as sad as things are, and we should never have to rely on it, the unity that it creates, and it's so clear, crystal clear, that the world is not to be relied on. And thank God we have our own resources, and that you have a situation where the calls for ceasefire, it's like ridiculous. You're dealing here within meters. Now it's being exposed what is really going on. These tunnels were meant to become a mass attack that they wanted to do, planning this coming Rosh Hashanah time, high holiday season. That who knows how many people they would have tried to kill. Now when you have, I don't know if you've been to Israel. Israel is the size of New Jersey. You're dealing here, things are miles away. Forget about the West Bank. The West Bank is interwoven with Israel. So now one thing is clear, like the day, and people are saying it already, the concept of a two-state solution is just totally ludicrous. As soon as you give a state to someone that can build a tunnel under your house, you have to be crazy. It's become total suicide. So this is what was exposed now. This is what happens. The humanitarian aid, the hundreds of millions of dollars went to build, I don't know if you saw these tunnels. There's infrastructures. They're not just tunnels. It's not everyone thinks some type of like tunnel they created. It's a total infrastructure with fortifications, with internet, places to live, to store weapons and so on. A whole city under a city, a country under a country. And so it's very clear what the intention is. The intention is not they're trying to get back a few settlements in the West Bank. They want Tel Aviv. They want everything. And this to me is so obvious, but it has to be stated because the propaganda is so intense. But I go back to the positive side, if you can say it as such, is that our journey continues, and we're not afraid of journeys. This is what needs to be done now. This is what will need to be done. It heartens the heart and soul to see young soldiers ready to sacrifice, and not already, many have sacrificed their lives to protect their brothers and sisters. God forbid that we need to rely on that in the 21st century. But it's there. They could easily move away from Israel, live somewhere else, but they're ready and they dance. Look at the celebrations and the unity that it creates. We understand that we're embattled, and thank God we have the army is necessary. Some people are saying just carpet, whatever, nuke the whole Gaza. Someone else I just read said, since Gaza is there, why doesn't someone just find like a type of razor blade and just cut the whole thing off and let it all fall into the Mediterranean? I don't know if that's doable. I'm not advocating these concepts. I'm just sharing some of the frustration. When I get there, I'll let you know what I think. We're all strategists. I rely on hopefully wise Jewish soldiers, military. But I want to say on a positive note, from our perspective, we're all in it together. Because it's not like us and them. As I mentioned, all the Jewish nation, entire Jewish nation is one large family, one large organism actually. So anything we do strengthens them, anything they do strengthens us. and God forbid the opposite also. So don't see yourself as a independent entity. Jews made the mistake already in World War II in America, saying this is not us, and we're silent. We have to do what it takes. Both of them want to understand the situation, not be apologetic, explain it to others who don't understand it, and protest when you see an injustice being written or said. At the end of the day, we have to be clear-headed. And if you don't have the words, talk to someone that is more educated or more informed and understands the whole history of the thing. I just was actually looking up on our own website. I remember now that I wrote, the last time there was the Gaza war, a few years ago, I wrote a whole dialogue I mediated the dialogue between pro-Israel and pro-anti-Israel, which I posted, which really goes through a lot of the facts that many people are simply not aware of. Where's Gaza come from anyway? What entity was it? Who controls it? Egypt, not, etc. So it's important to know our facts, and above all, to know what we have to do when it comes to times like this, which is, as I said, number one, to fortify the spiritual Israel, which is through Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim, like it says. We're going to read in the Haftarah next week before Tisha B'Av, the last words of Yeshaya Hanavi in the Shabbos Chazon. He says, "Tziyim b'mishpat tipada v'shaveh b'tzdaka." How more apropos are those words? What does that mean? Zion, b'mishpat, through Torah, through study, through justice, will be redeemed. V'shaveh, and its captives and its hostages will be freed through charity. Literally, this is the situation. Zion, Israel, is under siege, and it has captives. It all began with the captives, three students that were kidnapped and then murdered. And it's the captivity of what. So what we're told is, how do you redeem Zion and the captives? Through mishpat, through Torah study, and through tzedakah, through charity. That does not mean we don't have to we don't have to bear arms and do what we do. Like Jacob taught us, you have to prepare prepare for war, pray, and prepare a bribe and appease them. And then, of course, war is the last resort. So they complement each other. There's nothing wrong with having both a spiritual war and a physical war together. You do what it takes. So don't underestimate what each of us can do. And it is all part of the larger journey, which reflects and mirrors our own journey in life. Each of us, no matter what you're in, situation, when things like this happen, sometimes our own little pains get pale in comparison. You start saying, what I'm going through, look at this. But that still doesn't mean we don't have our own issues. So remember, you too, each of us here, is also on a journey to the promised land, to the holy promised land. And each of us has to go through the navigate, the twists and turns. And you navigate when you have a GPS, when you have some type of compass that gives you direction. Now, what's the direction? The purpose and mission of your life. That's ultimately the goal. So what I said before, a good swimmer knows how to navigate, but a good swimmer also knows how to get to the destination, whatever it takes. And that's what Jews also knew. They knew not only that you don't live in the moment and that the journey is, everything is a journey to another place, they kept their eyes on the ball. They kept their eyes at the destination. In Judaism, we call it Mashiach. I know some people are frightened by that word. It's fraught with all kinds of misconceptions and stereotypes. But it simply means a world that will realize the purpose of why God created this universe. And that is a world of harmony, a world of unity, where as diverse as we may be, we'll join together in one tranquil environment. So that's what they kept their eyes on. So even in the harshest of times, they would sing Ani Mamin. The song Ani Mamin has different tunes to it. But the words are, I believe with complete faith in the coming of Mashiach. And though he may tarry, Alpha Pishi Yismameh, he may be delayed, I still believe. It's one of the most tremendous statements of faith. It says, no matter what, the journey continues. Even if I don't always see how it's going to end up, I believe, like the spiral staircase, that the destination will be good. And some people can say, hey, that's a very type of almost like a naive, childish attitude. No. It's an attitude actually that comes with hard-earned prices we've paid. We're not talking about a bunch of little starry-eyed people. We're talking about a Jewish people that suffered like no one else has. And we still maintain our head above water in that way. We still move on. It's unbelievable. To me, when I think of the contrast, 1945, to where we are today, all the obituaries written about the Jewish people. Read article after article, and after World War II said that by year 2000, it should be 55 years later, there will be not one Jew left on earth. It's scientifically, that's the statistics show. Why? 6 out of 18 million were massacred. Millions of others were left homeless, without family, without home, without a penny to their name. The rest of the Jews, most of them were being assimilated and intermarrying and so on. So what would you predict after World War II? If you were just a statistician, you'd sit down and make the numbers. The point is, Atam ma'at mikol ha'amim, the Torah says, that you are the fewest among all nations. And as the Gemara, the Talmud says, ma'at means few, but also means because you humble. You humble yourself. You never become arrogant. So few also has a big quality. It means that you survive because you're not so consumed with yourself. And that's something that a statistician and a scientist cannot measure. How do you measure spirit? How do you measure resolve? How do you measure immortality? And that's what happened. A broken nation, destroyed in so many ways, picked up in pieces, 1945, and rebuilt their lives. As impossible as it sounds. The Kloisenberger Rebbe lost an entire wife and entire 11 children, I believe. How do you even survive something like that? Your whole life. Your children, you remember every name of them, and they're no longer here. You're the only one left. How many people can move on from there? Now, I never forget the anguish. The loss is not forgotten. It's not like, but there's some deeper strength to build, and he gave many people strength, and he rebuilt the community, and was one. There were many others like this. He's just one of the more prominent ones that people know. How he consoled little children and orphans and widows and widowers. The first Yom Kippur after the camps after they were freed from the camps. I heard from people, eyewitnesses in the DP camps, what that Yom Kippur was like. Imagine Yom Kippur 1945, 1946 maybe. After people were coming out, everything was gone. The story is unbelievable. Just imagine the scene. Thousands of individuals without anything left. No siblings, no parents. It's almost impossible to imagine. Every one of us, we all have families. You have your brothers, sisters, you have parents. Obviously, some of us have we suffered. Some of us lost parents or lost relatives maybe in our lives. But here you have somebody, an orphan. Every brother, sister is gone. No father, no mother, no home, nowhere to go. No grandparent, nobody around to pick up the pieces. Which is usually the case. God forbid, there's a tragedy. You have someone that helps. I'm not minimizing tragedies, but you get the idea. And here was hundreds, thousands. And yet something that nobody could really measure. Even now, we don't really understand it, but it's the story of the Jewish people. It's like a pilot flame that never goes out. No matter what happens, the pilot flame will not go out. The Am Yisrael Chai, the Pintel Yid, the spark, you see it in times of crisis, tragically. And we have to remember to try to hold on to something like this in times of plenty. We don't have to wait for crisis to awaken that spirit. It becomes difficult because we become apathetic when things are going well. So let's remember to hold on to this in positive ways. Now is the time to strengthen love for each other, reaching out to a stranger, be kinder. This is the time that we're in. That's why in the 3 weeks, that's what we do. We don't sit around and just wallow in our misery over the destruction of the temples. No, you add in charity, you add in study, you study the laws of the Beis HaMikdash, which helps rebuild it. You add in Avos Yisrael and loving others, acts of kindness, etc., etc. That's how you battle it. And the more the misery, the more the pain, the more the loss, the deeper the commitment to the light. And that's Ani Ma'amin. I believe with complete faith, and though he may tarry, and though I may not see the picture, and I cannot see how this is going to end, I know it will, in a good way. This is the sign of a true navigator, a true traveler. So both on a personal level and on a collective level, this is the story of our lives, story of our people. It's a marathon. And every generation carries the baton for the leg of the marathon, both, again, collectively and individually. Never forget that. Sometimes we get so caught up in the whirlwind, in the roller coaster of life, your immediate issues, your immediate needs, survival, paying a bill, other hassles and so on. And you have to step back at times and remember there's a big picture. You were chosen to be here in the world today, in this generation, as part of a continuing journey, as I said, a marathon. And you have a role to play. You're responsible to fulfill your role. That's the bottom line. You have to focus on your destination. And if you don't know what that role is, you're responsible to find out. And that's by asking and caring and being desperate, maybe even to search for it. And to indulge in just taking care of your own needs and the immediate and saying, I have no time for others and no time, I have to take care of my needs. It's frankly selfish. And it's definitely a disgrace if we turn to our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and people who are ripped away from this world before their time and tell them, you know what, I decided I'm not really part of this, I have my own life to take care of. It's not appropriate. So we honor people who've given their lives. Here we have 37 soldiers who've died tragically to protect other Jews. And for what? What are they gaining here? Just to protect from these senseless attacks that are just meant to terrify and just meant to randomly kill whoever it may strike. Completely, what's the word I want to use? Completely not random, non-targeted. What's the word for it? There's some word for it. So you honor people like that by what? By going back to your own life and saying, I'm taking care of myself. No, we have to be soldiers as well. Soldiers on the front in our own lives. That's what a soldier does. A soldier is on the move all the time. And even when a soldier is crouching and not physically moving, that's also part of the move, like I said. It's navigating. It's knowing when to make a forward movement. It's knowing when to stop. If you look at military strategy, that's a big part of military strategy. As a matter of fact, they say some of the military strategy, the brilliance of military strategy is not knowing when to go, it's knowing actually when to retreat and let the enemy think you're retreating. There's all kinds of tactics used. It's all about navigating, knowing how to maneuver and navigate the difficult waters when you're dealing with adversarial forces. There was a tactic used and it's brought in Hasidic thought that sometimes you actually go out into the open and let the enemy attack you to draw them out. So you may lose a few, but now you've drawn them out and you can conquer. So you lose a few to win a lot more. We shouldn't need to do that. But there are many tactics. So a soldier in the army and the military, whether it's Navy, Army, or Air Force, are always on the move. I don't just mean physically. That's what a soldier is. Now, thank God we live in a world where we don't have to be in battle all the time with real enemies. Here, unfortunately, in Israel, they do have to. But when there is no battle physically, there's still a spiritual battle. Are you going to be a couch potato, apathetic, paralyzed, just taking care of and immobile, or are you going to be on the move? What does that mean? That you continue to grow. Ma'alan b'kodesh. On Hanukkah, one of the lessons we learn, why do we add a candle every day? Why not just light one each day? So it's a whole discussion, Mahadrim and Mahadrim, because technically, the key is to light 8 days. You don't have to light 1, then you light 2, you light 3 and 4. It actually adds up to a lot more than 8 when you count all the candles, because there's the concept, as Hillel says, Ma'alan b'kodesh. You increase in holiness, that is a person on the move. You're never satisfied and say, I kept Shabbos last week, yeah, but this week a little more passion, something innovative. That's what healthy people do. Look at business people. They don't say it's just enough. If I made a profit last year, I don't just want the same. Misha yesh le'emana, someone who has 100 wants Messiah 200. And they'll look for innovative ways to make it even more exciting. You want lessons? I see it always, the best lesson you can take is from Coca-Cola. Now Coca-Cola always coming up with innovations. The same little brown fizzy drink that has no particular value is the biggest brand on earth, and now their cans have these names. Buddy, Pop, this, and everybody's intrigued. Coca-Cola came up with a new campaign, just simply to get our attention. Because the name of the game is, if you're not busy living, if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. If you're not renewing yourself, you're regressing. That's the name of the game on business and definitely on a spiritual level. That's how we have to be, dynamic. Every day is a new, fresh day. Do you think like that? Or only children think like that? What happens to us as adults? We stop thinking of every new day as new opportunities. We say, you know what, new opportunity once every 10 years, I'll also be happy. One guy tells me, I don't even want new opportunities. I'm happy if I come out at the end of the day unscathed and not worse than yesterday. That is already for me happy. Well, that's what's the word? Cutting ourselves short? Is that the expression? Selling ourselves short. When you have ability every day, new day. L'vkarim chadoshim, a new day, new fresh energy to do something new. Why did God give you a new day? Just to do what you did yesterday? He gave you yesterday for that. And like I said, doing nothing. Well, it wasn't. Like the guy said, I'm doing nothing today. You said you're doing nothing yesterday. He said I wasn't finished. So we're not talking about continuing doing nothing. We're talking about doing something. So this is an attitude. This is called a journeyman, a journey person. Let's not make it sexist. Today it's a business person, spokesperson, flight attendants, no more stewardesses. We're being. But the point is that it's about a journey, and a journey is a tremendous asset when you understand your life. In Hasidic and Kabbalistic thought, especially Hasidic thought, talks about Yeridus HaNeshama B'guf, the long and arduous journey the soul took to come down to this earth. Only what? Yeridus Tzorech Aliyah, to come down in order to reach a greater place. You may have heard this line, but think about it for a moment very practically. It means that every move you make is meant to yield a profit, is meant to yield something more than what you began with. And the same is spiritually, and the same is psychologically. Imagine your life is lived that way, that every day you achieve something more than you've achieved till today. Guaranteed 80% of your problems would disappear. Because you'd have that confidence and you'd have that sense of satisfaction, contentment. Look what I did today. Not in an arrogant way, just feeling fulfilled. What happens when we don't feel fulfilled? We feel a void, so we start looking for something. And usually it's unhealthy. You find something, some type of short-term, short instant gratification or something that will just relieve your pain or your loneliness. But when a person is content and fulfilled and they feel tomorrow is a new challenge, I can't wait to wake up in the morning. How many people even get excited to wake up in the morning? I know people, you do? Good. You get excited to jump out of bed, take on a new day. Some people tell me, I wish I didn't have to wake up today. They don't mean to die, but they mean, skip a day. Because it tells you pretty much what's going on in your life. Maybe you can share with us why you're so excited every day. Like what happens when you jump out of bed?
You want me to?
Yeah, please.
I started a new innovative real estate team at Douglas Elliman based in Miami, and we have a team now in New York, and there'll be a team in LA. And I wake up an hour to an hour and a half before my alarm clock, busting out of bed with a tremendous amount of energy, and I go all day. I'm so busy, I can't even eat. I drink breakfast and I drink lunch, and maybe I'll get in dinner, but I have so much energy because I'm so excited about this, and it's receiving so much great positive feedback.
So I wish upon you that the rest of your life you should continue having this energy. Have you always had such energy, or only this new venture?
No, I think I've always had this energy, but now
Okay.
it's like at a whole new level.
Good.
Okay,
so here we have, you just heard a live specimen.
But this is also after a 20-year journey. You were talking about a journey.
Right.
This has been a 20-year journey of my spiritual development to figure out my purpose. So it's been 20 years, and now it's finally here, and I'm really excited.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, do you believe that she's 20 years old? Huh?
It's very exciting, and it's all.
Okay, good. And it was not a setup for those of you listening, wherever you may be. Yes. Well, look, I'm quite glad to hear. You're definitely from the minority. I hope you know this. I wish it upon everyone. But it has a lot to do with embracing or finding your mission, embracing it, and being excited to perpetuate it. So, my friends, like this. So as we read the chapter about journeys, and we are on a journey in the 3 weeks, and it's the summer when we go on journeys, and there's the journey, of course, that Israel is going through, sadly again. It's almost a repeat of previous. We all know we're on our way somewhere better. And as the Baal Shem Tov says, "Hashem etzadi gover kenanu," God leads the footsteps of a person. So every journey is led. The question is what you're going to do. So when you come somewhere, whether you went for business reasons, for vacation reasons, for some other ulterior motive, there's always a deeper reason that you went. So it's always good to keep your eyes open for the things that are unexpected. When you go somewhere, keep your eyes open for the things you didn't plan. You may have your meetings, but there's things that happen between the meetings. And things happen when you're walking to your hotel, or you're hanging out here, or you're going there on the beach, whatever it may be. And that's when the real plan happens. See, the greatest things happen when human beings get their plans out of the way, so God's plan can manifest. And that's when, but also often our human plans, we become so rigid in our own plans, we don't let any spontaneity in. So you say, someone says, hey, how are you? I have no time, I'm running to a meeting. You never know, that how are you could be the whole reason you're there for that person. Or you're there for that person, or they're there for you. Or maybe both. So the concept of journeys takes on a whole different meaning, that we are led to places, no matter what reasons we may have, for something to happen. And when you think of it that way, that's also new opportunities. I'm going for a particular reason to Israel. Ostensibly, initially, it was to speak at a Yemei Iyun, a group of adult women education in Israel called Or Chaya, where I'm going to speak there for a few. There's Yemei Iyun, it's called. 3 days of Iyun, in depth, I guess, like seminars or whatever. But I'm sure that may not be the main reason. And I had no idea that when this was planned, the events in Israel were not what was happening now. I'm sure there's going to be kinds of interesting surprises. And I'll report back. I want to say this next 2 weeks, there will not be a live class. That is this place. I'm going to record them so they'll be online, but it'll only be online. So I'll miss you all, physically that is. But you won't miss me because you could see me on the screen. So today we have that disproportion. But if you'd like to send me a video message, I'll be happy to listen to you too. But regardless, I will be, again, if anybody wants to send over any blessings or prayers or names or charity to Israel, I'll be happy to take it as a messenger. And I'll be going Saturday night, Mitzvah Shabbos, with God's plans. That should be the case. And I'll leave Kerry and the other diplomats to figure out how to cause more problems. I'll try to be there to help create solutions. And so that'll be the next 2 Wednesdays, which is next Wednesday and the following one, which is after Tisha B'Av. But I will be back, I believe August 10th would be the right date. I'm not sure, August 10th, August 6th maybe. No, August 6th, August 13th. August 13th. So it's 2 weeks off, and then, yeah. And Philip will be giving his class tomorrow, but I want to conclude on this note. It's already 1943 years, 45 years, since the temple was destroyed. It's a long time. It's almost 2,000 years. And we're here. We're standing. Talk about it. We will dim the lights on Tisha B'Av unless Mashiach comes. Maybe we'll still dim the lights for other reasons. And we will be honoring these sad days as we've honored them so many years. But as sad as they are, it should give us hope. Because look, we made it through all these trials and tribulations. Whatever we have today doesn't come close to what the Romans set out to do. And then after the Romans, it was the next generation, and the next, and the next, and the next. Came the Crusades, and came the Inquisitions, the pogroms, and of course the Holocaust, and everything in between, the Middle Ages. So we're here. It's a tremendous concept, because that means that at Tisha B'Av, every year we honored it, and we not only survived, we're here strong. That's something that should not be taken for granted. That means there's something in there that you can take to our personal lives. Like I said, the pilot flame does not go out. Obviously, we want more than just a pilot flame. We want to fan it to have a full-blown flame. So for every one of us has unbelievable responsibility, because today we live in a world where most Jews are ignorant of what it means to be Jewish, confused, misunderstood. And it's critical for any of us that have some commitment, have some involvement, awareness, to share that. Because for every Jew today that is somewhat familiar, you have 100 that are not. And I'm not saying this in any the critical or the condescending way. I mean it as a responsibility. It's a part that drives me. I was privileged. I was the right time in the right place. I can't say it was due to my effort. I was born in the right place at the right time. Obviously, effort is that you live up to it as well, and not take it for granted. But then you say, why me? I could have been born into a completely assimilated home or environment, and I wouldn't know anything about what it means to be Jewish. I'd be going to birthright to just get a sense of what Israel is about. So why God chose some of us to be born into this family and some of the other is the mysterious ways of God. But one thing is for sure, we're sitting here right now and you're listening to this. You have responsibility. It's not just bystanders, spectators. We have to do something. What to do? Each of us has our mission. Those that I write, I teach, I use my skills my way. You have to find your skills and use it not just for your own personal gain, but you have to use your social media and your contacts and your networks and your emails, whatever it is, to share some kind, good words. What better time than now, when Jews are being challenged? So now's the time for us to unite and reach. And I guarantee you, put your head, think about it for 3 minutes, you'll come up with ideas. It's called in Hebrew simat lev. You have to care. If you care, you come up with ideas. If you don't care, you don't come up with ideas. Just apply yourself. Make believe it's your business. How do I reach any Jew or any person for that matter that I can reach with some kind word? I don't think today is that very difficult to do if you think about it. If it's your own business, you'll have no problem. You're going to find this one, this network, mailing list, this thing, that thing. So, I'm throwing some responsibility on everybody. I hope you don't mind. It's good, sometimes good to feel good about yourself, but also you have to feel responsible. And that's the Jewish way. So with that said, may we use these days well, these journeys well, to take the advantage of them, and in this leg of the journey to know how to capitalize on it, strengthen ourselves, strengthen others, and may there be peace in Israel, real peace, and enough is enough, and peace for the entire world. We Jews pray and celebrate peace not just for the Jewish people, but peace for all human beings on earth, including in Israel, including Arabs, including Muslims. Every life is sacred. And it says in the Medrash, an interesting thing, that had the nations of the world known how much the temple protects them, they would have, instead of destroying it, they would have surrounded it with legions of armies to protect it. Imagine. They just didn't know. So the world knew how much Israel and Jerusalem and the Holy Temple, that all was destroyed in this period of time, does blessings for them, they would stand and protect it. Interesting, many Christians actually do sense it today, especially Christian right. Whatever your opinion may be, the bottom line is they're major supporters of Israel. Sometimes even more so than Jews, sadly. Financially, and physically, and in many ways. It's an interesting commentary of its own. Anyway, as I said, may God bless us that we should not need any more pain and suffering, and those that have lost lives, their families should be consoled, and their souls should be redeemers of the rest of us, because they gave their lives for other Jews to protect. And we should do our part. We're also part of the army. We're part of the military. We're part of it, in the spiritual sense of it, do our part. And b'shitzim b'mishpat tipada, b'shaveh b'zdaka. That Zion should be redeemed through mishpat, through justice, through Torah, through law, and shaveh, its captives, through charity. We should only have blessings. So until I see you in 2 weeks, everyone should have very good, continuing good, humid or non-humid summer. And I'll send best regards from all of you to the Holy Promised Land. And but the classes will, as I said, continue. Okay, so until then, everyone have a very good week and a few good weeks. Be well.